Today we're breaking down every character who could realistically kill Homelander, and some of these possibilities might surprise you. The world of The Boys is pretty messed up, to say the least. The line between heroes and villains is practically non-existent, and having morals is sometimes nothing more than a death wish. Power is everything. The stronger you are, the more unstoppable you become. People with power control the narrative, control the media, and often control the fate of everyone around them. And when it comes to power, one name stands above everyone else. Homelander. He truly is terrifyingly powerful. He's faster than jets, strong enough to tear through armored vehicles like paper. His laser vision can cut through almost anything, and he has X-ray vision. On top of that, he's practically indestructible. Bullets don't hurt him, explosions barely slow him down. Conventional weapons that could destroy entire military bases wouldn't even scratch him. And the few times we've seen him struggle in a fight, it's only been against the most powerful beings in the entire show after himself. Along with having the powers of a god, Homelander is also seen as one, despite committing some of the most brutal and atrocious crimes imaginable behind the scenes. Homelander is widely recognized as a symbol of justice. Millions of people adore him, the media praises him, corporations profit from his image to the public. He's the perfect superhero. And that's exactly what makes him so terrifying, because when someone with that much power is worshipped by the world, stopping them becomes almost impossible. But here's the thing. Even someone as powerful as Homelander isn't completely unstoppable. Over the course of the series, we've seen hints that certain characters could actually defeat him under the right circumstances. Some of them have the raw strength to challenge him. Others have abilities that might successfully counter his powers. And a few might be able to defeat him through intelligence, preparation, and strategy rather than brute force. The first and most obvious candidate is Soldier Boy. Soldier Boy is one of the few characters in the entire series who has actually managed to go toe-to-toe with Homelander in a direct fight, and that alone says a lot. Physically, Soldier Boy is incredibly strong. He's durable enough to survive explosions that would destroy buildings, and his combat experience makes him far more disciplined than most other supes. Unlike many superheroes who rely purely on their abilities, Soldier Boy has decades of battlefield experience. But what really makes Soldier Boy dangerous is his unique ability. His energy blast doesn't just cause destruction, it can actually remove other supes' powers. That means if Soldier Boy hits Homelander with that blast, there's a real chance Homelander could lose the abilities that make him so dangerous, and once that happens, the fight changes completely. Homelander without his powers is no longer an unstoppable god. He becomes just another person vulnerable to the same dangers as everyone else. The biggest problem with relying on Soldier Boy, however, is that he's almost as unpredictable as Homelander himself. A lot of this unpredictability originates from his tragic past. Soldier Boy was once a government-sponsored superhero who fought in wars and represented American power. But he was eventually betrayed by his own team and captured. For decades, he was imprisoned and subjected to brutal experiments and torture. Instead of breaking him, however, the experience only made him stronger and much more unstable. Soldier Boy isn't a hero. He's violent, bitter, and extremely difficult to control. So, while he might be capable of defeating Homelander, trusting him to actually save the world is another matter entirely. The next character who could potentially defeat Homelander is someone much younger. Ryan is Homelander's son, and he's also the first naturally born supe in the entire show. Unlike most superheroes who received their abilities through Compound 5 injections, Ryan inherited his powers genetically. That difference could turn out to be extremely important because genetically inherited powers might develop differently from the abilities of normal supes. Ryan already possesses many of the same abilities as Homelander: flight, super strength, and heat vision, but he's still a child, which means his powers are likely still growing. If Ryan continues to develop those abilities, it's entirely possible that he could eventually become even stronger than Homelander. And if the story ever reaches a point where Ryan has to confront his father, that fight could determine the fate of the entire world. But the real power of that moment wouldn't just come from the action, it would come from the emotion behind it. Because Homelander may be capable of destroying cities, but the one person he genuinely cares about is his son. Ryan choosing to stand against him would break something inside him, and that emotional vulnerability might be exactly what allows someone to finally defeat him. Moving on, we have the person who has dedicated his entire life to trying to kill Homelander, Billy Butcher. Butcher's hatred for Supes has driven almost every decision he's made throughout the story. To him, Homelander isn't just an enemy, he's the embodiment of everything wrong with the world. When Butcher briefly used temporary Compound V, we saw just how dangerous he could become. With those powers, Butcher gained super strength, enhanced durability, and laser vision that looked suspiciously similar to Homelander's own abilities. In fact, during one of their confrontations, Butcher was actually able to fight Homelander directly. That's something almost nobody else in the series has managed to do. The biggest obstacle for Butcher is that the temporary Compound 5 is slowly killing him. But if he ever decides to take permanent Compound 5, things could change dramatically. A fully powered Butcher, driven by years of rage and obsession, might be the one person ruthless enough to do whatever it takes to finish Homelander once and for all. The irony, of course, is that by becoming a Supe, Butcher would essentially become the very thing he hates, and that moral conflict could become one of the most tragic parts of his entire story. Another potential force capable of defeating Homelander isn't a single person at all. It's the military power of Vought International and the governments that rely on it. Throughout the series, Vought has been deeply connected to the military-industrial complex. For decades, they've experimented with Compound V, creating increasingly powerful Supes and studying their abilities in extreme detail. This means that if anyone understands how Supes work, how their powers function, and how they might be countered, it's Vought. And if Homelander ever became too dangerous to control, it's very possible that Vought itself could turn against him. Corporations like Vought survive by protecting their interests, and if Homelander ever threatened the company's power or reputation beyond repair, eliminating him might become their only option. That's where the military comes in. With access to advanced research, experimental weapons, and decades of data on Supe biology, Vought could potentially develop technology designed specifically to counter someone like Homelander. Anti-Supe weapons, chemical suppressants, or even enhanced soldiers created with modified versions of Compound V could theoretically level the playing field. Of course, stopping Homelander would still be an incredibly dangerous task. Even with advanced weapons, confronting someone with his abilities would be a massive risk. But if the entire military infrastructure backed by Vought were ever forced to act, it might be one of the few forces powerful enough to even attempt the impossible, bringing down the most powerful Supe in the world. Another character who proved she could stand up to Homelander is Queen Maeve. Maeve may not be as powerful as Homelander overall, but she's still one of the strongest Supes ever created. More importantly, she's one of the few characters who has actually managed to hurt him in a fight. During their confrontation, Maeve demonstrated incredible skill, endurance, and determination. She fought Homelander head-on, fully aware that the battle could easily cost her life. She was willing to sacrifice herself if it meant stopping him. And that willingness to go all the way makes her extremely dangerous, because when someone stops caring about their own survival, they become much harder to defeat. Even if Maeve can't overpower Homelander alone, she's proven that she can hold her own long enough for others to step in. And sometimes that's exactly what winning a fight against someone like Homelander requires. The next most likely candidate who could defeat Homelander is the team of the boys themselves. Even though most members of the team don't have superpowers, they should never be underestimated. Huey Campbell, Starlight, and all of their allies have spent years studying Supes, learning their weaknesses, and finding ways to fight back. They rely on intelligence, preparation, and teamwork rather than raw strength, and sometimes strategy can defeat enemies who seem invincible. If the boys ever manage to develop a weapon specifically designed to counter Homelander's abilities, the fight could shift dramatically in their favor. After all, history is full of examples where technology eventually found ways to defeat even the most powerful warriors. And if there's one thing the boys are good at, it's finding creative ways to fight enemies who should be impossible to beat. Of course, there's another possibility we have to consider. What if Homelander isn't defeated in a traditional battle at all? If there's one thing we've learned about him throughout the show, it's that he's one of the most unstable characters in the entire world. The story has always focused heavily on psychological conflict as well as physical fights. Homelander's greatest weakness isn't necessarily his body, it's his mind. He craves approval, admiration, and love more than anything else. Without those things, he becomes unpredictable and emotionally unstable. If the entire world ever turned against him, if the admiration disappeared and the applause stopped, the psychological impact could be devastating. That vulnerability might open the door for someone to finally stop him. It's pretty clear that the story has been building toward one final confrontation between Homelander and the rest of the world. And when that moment finally arrives, it probably won't be a simple fight. It will likely involve several people working together. That kind of confrontation would be about more than power. It would be about family, revenge, redemption, and finally checking power that has gone unchecked for way too long. At the end of the day, the real question isn't just who could kill Homelander, it's whether anyone actually will, because defeating him requires the courage to stand against a force that seems unstoppable. And the sad truth is that in the selfish world of the boys, courage can sometimes be harder to find than superpowers. But if history has taught us anything, it's that even gods can fall. And when Homelander finally does, the fallout will reshape their entire world permanently. If you made it this far, a like would really be appreciated, and if you enjoyed this video, there are plenty more for you to check out. Thank you so much for watching.